disconnect between data or statistics and place. So now we do development and democracy by sitting in laboratories and cooking data and statistics about places we have never visited. We know how many poor people are in Madare, in Korogosho, in Kibera, and we even engage in poverty pornography, which is when high-level people go and visit the poor for a day and only smell the sewage for a day and then go back feeling pity for the poor. And they write a blog saying something must be done. If you divorce the experience that you find obnoxious from the economic and social system that produces and reproduces that kind of life and livelihood, then all you become is an echo of the empire. You are a caricature, a muppet, a puppet. You are suffering from intellectual insomnia, sleepwalking. Of course, now we face a problem of only in Africa do we ever say there are no alternatives. When we tried to go socialist, there was no other alternative. When we have gone rapidly, not just capitalist, neoliberal, we now say there is no alternative. In Africa, where you can suffer and go to a doctor trained in Harvard or Cuba, or one trained by the ancestors in the middle of the night to see herbs, how can an African believe there are no alternatives? In Africa, where if I asked you to raise your hands in this room and say, how many of you were born in hospitals? They may be maybe 60%. But there are those of us in this room who were born in the middle of conditions that Westerners think would kill somebody. We are here surviving during democracy because in spite and despite of all odds, we were born, we were raised, we are normal and fighting for a normal and just world. How can you be an African and not believe in alternatives? For my sisters who are oppressed by patriarchy, in a world where man can either illicitly or licitly accumulate without responsibility or capacity intimate partners, and they move around proudly with a chain of children who, the majority of whom they paid no school fees, and be happy to be called Tata or Daddy, how can you not believe in alternatives? When we were told that only children born and raised by fathers grow up to be normal, and you were raised either by your grandmother or by your mother who was tenacious, she was a mamamboga, she was such a walker, whatever your mother was, they raised you to become the powerful African that you are, and we were told you are supposed to be abnormal, dysfunctional, yet you are fighting for justice, for inclusion, for equity. How can you not believe in alternatives? So, we see hegemonic knowledge that tells us there's only one way of knowing and doing. We also see an esotericism. Esotericism, that means if you look at this thing, it looks like you are copying someone. It's so flimsy, it does not pass for anything. After I am done in the next couple of minutes, in which I hope I'll be able to change your life completely, right? I want to suggest something to you. Number one, that I do appreciate how your activism may have become 90,000 kilometers wide. It is known from here to Honolulu. It is retweeted from Guangzhou to Canberra, right? From Hawaii to Mrambador. People know you. However, the depth of your activism may still remain 1 inch deep, even with 90,000 kilometers wide. Because an activism whose breadth and impact has no depth, ideologically, intellectually, becomes not only a danger to itself, but a danger to transformation in Africa. Because you begin to occupy space and waste space that should be occupied by people who are looking to do much more than hug headlines and appear important. Do you want me to give you good news from history? Yeah. I will do so, but I wanted you to frame for yourself. What is the abnormality of the democratic moment we live in? It cannot be militarism. The history of Western bourgeois democracy was founded in violence and militarism. The crushing of the Paris Commune, the American Revolution in which the workers and the farmers that produced slavery and the consensus amongst white elites. I could go on. There is no single historical moment where bourgeois democracy was founded on peace without the bloodshed or exploitation of one invisibilized class. If you are a woman, you will know it was not until 1930 in an America that was founded over 100 or 200 years earlier, saying that all men are created equal before God and the Constitution, women did not have the right to vote. It was not until after 1960 that black people, Negroes, became humans under that Constitution. In fact, they're still struggling. That's why you see Black Lives Matter, I can't breathe, and so on and so forth. So this liberal bourgeois democracy has never been separated from the reality of racism. It is in its DNA. The politics of representation, people, does not always lead to integration. It leads to codification of contradiction. Let me explain it to you. It is important to be represented. We will all be represented in our little ethnic and other constellation, which is important because we have not found a class basis of representation. So we now use ethnicity or gender or so on. So when we are done, those of you who come from a tribe that is not sexually productive and you are only 100,000 in a country like Nigeria with several million, meritocracy, which is your capacity to transform Nigeria, will not get you anywhere because your position was rigged by nature. The fact that you come from a small tribe. So anything that reproduces the benefit of the dominant. So don't be surprised that there's now ethnicity. You write stupid books about ethnicity and democracy. That is why the Irish dominated when they controlled in America. Then the Jews came, and then, of course, you had others that are coming. It has always been the nature of liberal democracy. But they found narratives to make it appear like the best system. If you sit here without alternatives, of course, you have to play that game. Go get yourself represented. Even in my country, Rwanda, where we don't believe in ethnicity, we know that the Batwas are not necessarily the most permanently represented people in government. We now begin to talk in very pejorative terms about such people in Kenya and Zimbabwe, historically marginalized groups. But which history? If we have always been democracies. Stop sleepwalking. Wake up. Is that okay? So, the question for the day is, militarism is not abnormal to democracy. It's been part of it. If militarism was not a core part of democracy, your countries would not have been colonially occupied by military force. The Cold War would never have happened. The number of amputees in Angola would not have happened. The 50,000 to 100,000 Mozambicans killed in defense of Boer capitalism in South Africa would not have happened. The number of black people liquidated in South Africa, it never would have happened. When it scares you by showing its true colors, you call it apartheid. If democracy is free, fair, regular elections of those who are interested in the political system, were there no elections under apartheid regime? Yes, but there were. That's why you never refer to America as an apartheid state. There were elections and black people were not voting. There were elections and women were not voting. What is the difference? There were elections and black people were slaves. We still call the oldest democracy in the world the United States of America. So call South Africa the oldest democracy in Africa. They've been voting from the time of Jan van Riebeeck. Killing us, voting. Selecting their representatives. Following parliamentary protocols. Passing laws. Developing towns. Building roads. Stop sleepwalking. I want you to understand, because I want to take us back to what then is abnormal. Right? So militarism is normal. Discrimination and exclusion is normal. Right? In fact, economic privilege is normal in democracy. The American House of Representatives and Senate has never had in its history more than 10% people who come from the poor class. If they do, they've come because they have support of the ruling class, the super wealthy. So the very nature of the link between liberal democracy and big money is not abnormal. Don't run around and say, no, the democracy in Kenya is now abnormal. Money is now playing a determinant role. Which democracy do you know? Where money was not important? Give me one where paupers were just standing up and saying, because I'm close to the ground, to the masses, this is Athenian, government of the people, by the people, I'm here representing myself. Never. There's no history of liberal democracy with that. There are different democracies, though. And that's what we'll come to, the abnormality. There were other democracies, though. Okay? Sorry, my sister.
I'm sorry for interrupting. I made the link between I'm from the people because we're having this kind of study case in Tunisia. Sorry for interrupting. I was, when you were speaking, I thought just at the moment about the presidential elections that we're having in Tunisia, about the guy who is independent, claiming, and not represented by any party, and not without any money, not from the state or other political parties. And it would be interesting, it's very interesting what you're saying, like to see this as a study case, I would say. Somehow.
Yeah. Okay, we've had many of those paupers trying it out, even in Kenya here, right? We've had it all the time. But the reason why I'm asking this is not so that we enter into a polemic on whether democracy should be dumped or not. I just want you, our parents, when you are going to marry, they say you must know who you are getting married to. I'm saying, if we're going to do democracy, let's know it for what it is. Is that okay? Yeah. And if you know that you are marrying a heavy drinker, so liberal democracy is a resource alcoholic. It has always been. It gobbles up resources. You know, tell me why we pay so much money to monitor elections that are free, fair, and transparent. So the question that you may have, because you are the activist, is the abnormality of our moment the very fact that we are normalizing the abnormal? We are normalizing the abnormal, right? Are we answering constitutional and legal questions? When you talk to lawyers, everything, we need new laws, and the laws will solve this, and because we have weak institutions, President Obama says Africa does not need strong men, it needs strong institutions. He didn't know that he would be followed by a strong man who would weaken their institutions. It sounds so good. It's part of that naive sleepwalking. Who is from South Africa here? Does South Africa have strong institutions? It even has a public protector who stood against the president until the president lost his office. It has a chief justice who has not feared to rule against anyone. South Africa is what you aspire for. You are fighting, you are being detained, arrested, being killed, fighting to be South Africa. My sister, you will share my speech with you. Is South Africa more equal? No. Is South Africa less discriminatory? No. Are women safer in South Africa? No. Are poor people happier in South Africa?
Definitely not.
Are Africans who are not South Africans happier in South Africa?
Not at all.
Should I go on? Yes. Is white capital happier in South Africa?
Yes.
Now you have stopped sleepwalking. You have understood the link between... You see, when I used to teach constitutionalism, the first lecture I would give students of law is that a constitution is promulgated for 4 reasons. Right? Because I knew all the other lecturers would lie to them. Number 1, a constitution is promulgated for the purposes of excluding violence from the poor. Right? Self-help from those who are excluded. Right? So basically, number 2, a constitution is promulgated to protect private property. In most of your constitutions, you can kill in defense of private property. Number 3, a constitution is promulgated in Africa in order to massage native insurgency. So after you have written everything that's Eurocentric, you then have one section that says, and Islamic law and traditional African customs will also apply, provided that they are not repugnant to the general conceptions of justice. Whose? So it institutionalizes the racial bifurcation or separation of the civilized and the native. It creates a ghetto in the Constitution for people like you. But that ghetto only functions if it adheres to the principles generally accepted by civilized nations. You can guess it is not your nation, right? So these comrades, constitutions are important, don't get me wrong. But constitutions must be unmasked that they are not liberation. They are not redemption. Otherwise, South Africa would be the most redeemed, liberated, free, equal society. Number 2, is this a political question? Is it simply about who's representing us? How many of you know there's a Kikuyu, there are Kikuyus in government here? In Kenya, there are some Kikuyus in government, and some Luos, and some different tribes. Can you just Kalenjin there as well? Huh? At the top level, right? How many of you who are Kikuyu and Kalenjin in this room are dancing with joy because we are there in government and we are doing well? Come on, can you wave at me and I just see you? How many of you who are Luo who are saying we were in before the handshake, we are in after the handshake? Just wave at me and say you are here. So something is interesting. The entire mobilization for office is done on the myth of representation. A representation is reduced to ethnic representation. And then when you have people from our ethnic background, we still don't have inclusion as the broad mass and the citizen. So we engage in the false consciousness. We fight each other. You are Taita, and I am, where's Wiper from? I'm Kamba, or I'm Kisi, I'm Yoruba, I'm telling you, my brothers and sisters, it's normally young people, you beat each other up. These Kikuyus, these Kambas, these so and so. What are you fighting for? Representation. Who will represent you? Old men who've been stealing for the last 40 years. False consciousness. Then we say, no, we need to be represented by young people. And then the young people stand up. How will the young people get elected? You have to go back to your people. Who are your people? The tribe. And then what are you doing? This is change. This is young people. Does ethnicity and racism represent transformation simply because it has more energy and virility? When we do the ethnic card, how many of you know how many women come just en masse? The women end up as a majority because in our ethnic groups, women are favored. Our mothers are at the top. Our sisters are honored. Therefore, the ethnic system is good for matriarchy. It's good for women. And how many of you know that? Of course, it's not. You are conscripted into a false consciousness. You fight tooth and nail into it. You end up with less voice, and you join again this civil society, which means NGO, next government official, or nothing going on. Is it a social question? Are we dealing with just issues of power, patriarchy? Are we dealing with power based on economy? Are we dealing with power based on? I want to suggest to you, is it economic or ideological? That actually it's not one of these things. Every single one of the things I've rubbished is important. The question I came to ask you, how have you reconceptualized representation so that you don't reproduce the false consciousness of the last 50 years in Africa? If you are stuck with doing democracy, how do you wake up in a democracy that is more egalitarian, that does not favor people because they were born in privileged backgrounds? How does your democracy reflect the interests of your class? Do you know your class and the interests of your class? Many of you may be young, but you have become elite. In fact, some of you in your youth, you have more comfort in labor and in leisure than old people who have worked much more years than you. Your NGO salary is higher than your father is paid to produce in the factory. You earn more than Mama Mboga has been earning selling vegetables at the corner of the shop for many years. If you are disconnected from Mama Mboga and from the labor question that Comrade was talking about, and from the peasant question, the primary producer, the fisher folk, the forest folk. And I'm not talking about this thing going there, taking pictures and selfies with them, going back and saying we're speaking on behalf of fisher folk. Immersing yourself in their daily struggle, understanding what it is, not trying to recreate the urban and unsustainable forms of production and livelihood, but also not trying to preserve them out of economies that are transforming. How do you modernize without destroying sustainability? How do you participate without attempting to lead? How do you go and support without becoming the voice? How do we avoid becoming the movement divas, the movement gigolos, the movement celebrities, the people who are getting American and European and other awards, Bill and Melinda Gates awards for doing these things? Little monkeys in a cage. Speaking on behalf of your people, articulately describing the nature of oppression. Too busy going to conferences, unable to transform the structure of the power that keeps your people. You hang on your whole certificates. Certificates that say you are leader. Why do I know? I was a member of the Young Economic, World Economic Forum, Young Global Leaders. I don't know how many awards I had from the US. And when I came back so happy with one of them, my own elder brother said to me, I'm so disappointed in you. I said, why? You cannot be happy that the World Economic Forum sitting in Geneva has recognized the effort we're making to fight for liberty. He said, you are worse than those Africans who were middlemen in the selling of slaves, because a glory that brought you no money, but just a headline, and rubbing shoulders with billionaires without any transfer to you or your people, has made you intoxicated. You are sleepwalking. You are a betrayer of the cause of transformation. I know you're trying to get those awards. You're a sellout. Just accept what you are. You're a sellout. When people are being oppressed, you go to the people and say, no, 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 no. You have to speak in language that those guys understand. When you go to the oppressor, you say to them, no, 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 no. There are one or two troublemakers, but the generality of the people understand. Basically, you have become a Panadol to the pain of people. You are drinking Panadol for the headache of the oppressor. So, Comrade Briggs began to talk, and many of you heard what he said. You missed my sister. Where isn't Jerry? Njoki. Njoki began to talk. I'm quite sure, Njoki, people just heard you. They just heard words. They didn't hear what you were saying. She said narrative is very important. Redemption of history and retelling it is very important. You don't tell history so that you become hysterical. We used to be great. We used to make kyondo and make so and so. That's decadence. You don't anymore. We are the ones who built the pyramids. Pythagoras came here to steal. You have no new theorem. Do you understand? No, I'm not against history. I'm simply saying, when we refer to history, it is not to become hysterical in inertia. It is to become inspired in innovation. You can read history and become very romanticist. Our ancestors, we had Queen Zinga. And Queen Zinga used to do and you are queen what? You are queen nothing, copycat. You are trying to be like Kardashian. Nothing. Useless. This space has become a fashion show industry. Who's best dressed, who speaks better, who looks better, who knows the donors better. Ask my friends from the donor agencies. When people come, they are outdoing each other, pulling each other down. No, we do better. Those people, they don't understand this methodology. Or these ones, they don't do this right. Their accountability. You are now competing on logistics and not revolution and transformation. Actually, some of you sound more apologetic than those of us who are supposed to be silent. When you work for the people we work for, you're supposed to sound a little moderate. Ask my sister Sarah, don't you want to pull your hair when you listen to some of these people? And I said, why do you apologize? Baldwin says, to be a Negro in America and not live in constant rage is a sign of abnormality. To be in an Africa where there must be potential and you are not constantly enraged by the condition of our people is a sign of abnormality. Comrade Briggs Bomber then said to you, he said, anger in and of itself does not harvest transformation. It may tend towards frustration. That's why Joki and Briggs were trying to point us. They said, and this is a story we hear from our brother in Nigeria, Farouk. Farouk is telling us, after you have become angry and identified the problem, without organization, without mobilization, all you become is like my dog. Let me describe my dog to you. When I started working, how many of you ever, your first job, And then I was like all those young people, dream of owning a car. For me, I didn't have a license, but don't tell anybody. So I gave myself second-hand car, nice car, eh? And then our parents lived in the township. And I don't know why, if you go to South C, South B, or in the township, the gates somehow, they start off straight. After some time, their orientation changes, right? They lean somewhere. Have you seen gates like that? So to open the gate, you had to give it a bit of a lift. So when you go, you would lift. I used to have a dog. The dog was called Simba. So the dog would bark a storm when I'm leaving. And you think the dog is going to bite my tires. But you see, because the remote control gates had not yet arrived, Comrade Briggs, you had to park and then go and, close the gate. It could happen easily. My patriotic front had not become as pronounced. Yeah, so I closed the gate. When I'm about to close the gate, the dog comes to the tire of my car, and it just releases its water, and then goes back. I said, that's civil society for you. There was a lot of bark, and then it just comes to the tire. You think it's going to bite, it just poured water on the tire. Are we together? So the normalization is the following. Abnormal normalization is the following. Number one, rhetorical consensus versus practical transformation. There's no leader. I like the skit that Cyrus asked you to do. If you go to the AU and say, youth empowerment, and say, yes, we'll give you an envoy. What's the job of the envoy? The job of the envoy is to amplify the statements of the chairperson. Who's the chairperson? Not a youth. Right? And of course, if you're an envoy, it's okay. This is not about Aya. Aya is a very wonderful sister. This is just about the position, right? Yeah. Right? They would not dare, as heads of state, when they are reforming the African Union, create a division or department of youth. They have Department of Political Affairs, Department of Economy, right? And if it comes to women, directorate. To youth, desk. Then they have a whole 25-year or 10-year implementation plan, Malabo, to get young people, demographic dividend, you must refuse to be a dividend and become a force. A dividend is that which a capitalist reaps at the end of their investment. You are not a dividend. You are not the outcome of someone's investment, right? And this is why I keep saying stop sleepwalking. Why have you not? And then when you talk to people engaged in how do I know? Ask my sister Rezan here, right? Since 2005, I've been taking young people through the Pan-African youth platforms to try and engage. Every job space I've gone into, I've poured money to get young people to engage. My disappointment, look at me, please, look at me. Everything I heard you say sounding radical. Most of you were lying. I have seen, since 2005, generations of people, they come close to ministers, to power, to presidents. They become presidential. Many. And they start moving around with bodyguards and baby minders. People carrying their bags, big cars. Everything you are saying about humility, how come government ministers want more salary, they want bigger cars, what for? The taxpayers' money. No, look at me. You are a liar. You want that Land Cruiser. And when we are all lining up to get into the conference at the African Union with my brother Job, who was then a main supporter, Job and I are lining up as the donors. You are coming. You know, the disease of importance infects this space. The disease of importance infects this space. You see a young person coming out of a cruiser. The driver opens. And immediately they are now walking like all those thieves who are ripping Africa off. They want to be in that. And then they stand up. They take pictures. They post pictures with the heads of states. The disease of proximity is it creates numbness. Your language becomes numb. Your narrative becomes numb. Do you know it doesn't matter how many times you sleep in a Mercedes-Benz shop, you will not wake up a Mercedes-Benz? It will not matter how many times you spend, even in the bed of the head of state. You will not wake up a head of state. Class consciousness. Class consciousness. Class consciousness. If you lose that, you are the easiest people to conscript. Because your anger sometimes is not ideologically anchored. Your anger sometimes is very selfish and self-profile driven. Your anger is image infused. You are only angry because you are not at the table. If we bring you at the table, your anger ceases, right? I ask my friends in Tunisia. My brother Job and I went to film the revolution as it happened. We filmed Tahrir Square and Occupy Nigeria. How many of those young people in Egypt and elsewhere were either left out after the change came, or those who were included were the ones who are now louder in condemnation of the force from which they came? Here in Kenya, I used to come during the Moikano years, myself, William Tunga, Makam Tu, and others would go into the joint African reflection space. We'll go and talk about sharing experiences about our struggles. I came here in Kenya after. I came for Bombers 202, then I came afterwards. And I found how many comrades were in government sounding strange. Say it with me, sounding strange. In South Africa, I had many comrades I was with in the Students' Union, maybe a year or so behind me, Melusi Kigaba, Fikile Mbalula, and co. We were the firebrands. Norbert Mao in Uganda, we were the firebrands of Students' Unionism. Go there now. Everything we condemned, misogyny, everything we condemned, they are the epitome of that. In Nigeria and in my village, they have a saying that's common. If you are a lizard in your own compound, you can't be a crocodile in the market square. So the judgment of this space is not just ideological. It is ethical. What is your relationship with power, your relationship with money, your relationship with difference? How do you treat people that are different to you? This space is the most intolerant space I know. This space has a tendency towards cliqueism, whether linguistic cliqueism or political cliqueism. To find an alternative, we need to destroy the tendency towards cliques, the tendency towards animosity to difference. This space has been infected by a Western lie. Young people don't like to read, so keep it brief. Our problems span over 1,000 years. How do you want me to keep them brief? If you have top-level understanding of the problem, you will have top-level answer. 90,000 kilometers wide, 1 inch or 1 centimeter deep. Listen, you can't transform Africa if you don't read. You can't transform Africa if you are not ethical. The new transformational agenda in an abnormal democratic context requires a new ethics, which is not dependent on an ombudsman, which is not dependent on a constitutional ethics committee, but which is dependent on consciousness. Consciousness is that willingness to define value, to define values, to define direction, and to be committed to it with life and limb. So now let me prepare to land. So we have an overdose of grammar. I mean, you guys are the most eloquent generation. Please just hold your hand. I've said many bad things about you. You guys are unbelievably eloquent. Very, very eloquent. I've never succumbed to a generation as eloquent. If you doubt me, just listen to your presidents and listen to yourselves. It's a world of difference. Why is that important? Words are often the embodiment of thought. So if your leader can't speak clearly, then they can't think clearly. But grammar is often the embodiment of copycatting. You know, English words can be copied from each other and quotations, right? So the eloquence I'm talking about is intellectual eloquence. The ability to process things to their logical conclusion. The ability to dispute ideas. The ability to construct new ideas. The ability to construct alternatives. So don't buy the third lie, which is that because of social media, the young people are more engaged. No, they are bored. They have a lot of time. Many are unemployed. Right? So social media activity is not a sign either of productivity or of revolutionary engagement. It may be a sign of boredom. So how do we harvest the boredom into a consciousness? We can't do it in 140 characters. Can I repeat? How do we harvest the activity or the boredom into a consciousness? I want you to have these 4 words: movement, moment, monument. Can you repeat after me? Movement, moment, and monument. Now, let me tell you, Briggs explained, there may be a moment that allows us to express our outrage against those in power, local or global. That moment galvanizes all of us. It's a mobilizational moment, but that moment is not yet a movement. Are we together? That moment is like how you feel. Are there only adults in this room? How you feel when you are with somebody you are intimate with and it's only the two of you, and the thoughts you are having towards each other are not to pray to Allah or to anybody else. Right? Do you get that moment? The levels of energy are unbelievable. Right? The level, are we together? Say moment. That's moment. Movement is what happens when you move from that temporary hype of energy to deciding I'm going to establish a life, a family, a process, an organization. That discipline to put structure to energy, that discipline to put and define outcome to energy, that discipline to count strategy for energy. That is movement. Are we together? Movement is never meant to last forever. That's why it is movement. Movement cannot retain the same character forever. That's why it is called movement. Movement encounters different moments. In the moments, the movement assumes the character it must in order to deal with the moment. I was taught by a young lady from Morocco. She taught me a saying. She said in Morocco there's a saying that says, let's be like a tree which sheds its leaves in different seasons, but it never changes its roots. The movement's roots are its ideology, its values, and its principles. But how the movement manifests to encounter militarism, to encounter kleptocracy, to encounter repression may take different forms based on context. And the reason why I tell a lot of young people context is important, but it is not a determinant of your analysis. If you take a class analysis, is the following. What we are contesting in Senegal, what we are contesting in Mali, what we're contesting in South Africa is power, unjust power. How it manifests at the local level may not be the most important thing. The tools of dealing with unjust power are tools that can be shared, borrowed, or invented. Are we together? So where I started in terms of class consciousness, first define yourself, because youth is not a permanent age. Look, I used to be youth too. I may not look youth. Yeah, but I keep telling people at the AAU that I'm youth, outside I'm not youth, but inside I'm youthy, How many of you are above the age of 25? Let me just see. You're above the age of 25. And how many are above the age of 30? Okay. You who are above the age of 30, you are in the departure lounge of youth. No, nobody told me this. I can tell you the truth. You are in the departure lounge. If you don't prepare to do what to do as an adult, you'll be shocked, because some of you in 2 years' time, you will not be youth. What did we learn? That's why class analysis must be linked to the analysis of youth. Is that okay? Class analysis must be linked to the analysis of youth. Otherwise, just being youth and included youth. Can I tell you which youth are likely to be included? Do you remember where I started about democracy and money and representation in our politics? Is those youth who can align with thieves or with political structures where money is generated licitly or illicitly that end up representing youth in parliament. Is that okay? So let's go. Localization of the global and globalization of the local. My friends, China is not going to go away. The fact that you are fighting local battle about your local thief does not mean that China, Turkey, Iran, Brazil, and all those people that want your resources, your land, that want your minerals, are going to wait for you to finish your local game. Can I repeat that again? How come you are all angry with me? I said the fact that you have a local thieving problem and a local domestic abuse by your leaders does not mean the external abuse threshold will minimize. So democracy has a local component. It's called local governance. Democracy has a national context. It is called accountable and developmental governance. Democracy has a regional component. It is called Pan-Africanism or regional integration. Democracy has a global context. It is called revolution against neoliberalism. If you don't contest the layers of injustice, the pollution of water, the seizure of farms and lands in Turkana is done by global players who are tired of being global. They've come to your local village. The decimation of fish stocks on the shores of Eritrea and Senegal and Mozambique is done by global players who have decimated their own fish. Now because they know you are fighting only your local battle, they've come to take your fish. When you are done with your local battle, your forest will be gone, your land will be gone, your fish will be gone, your clean air will be gone. Now you tell me, you may be thiefless, but airless. That's why it is important. Is it making sense?
Yeah, it is.
Is it making sense? The abnormality of our time is that the global and the local have merged because the interest of global finance capital, whether what my comrade there was talking about debt or investment or simply primitive accumulation by shadowy financial systems, has increased. But at the same time, local repression has increased. At the same time, the levels of corruption and theft have increased. So I can't come here and say, don't fight anti-corruption because we have global thieves. But I am only saying to you, if you want to fight thieves, I learned it one day. My neighbor had 4 dogs. And so in a feeling of confidence, I was going to one of those high school dinners. The small dog started biting, following me. I kicked it. I had not seen the other 3 dogs. Needless to say, I missed the high school dance because the dogs had somehow had a very participatory interaction with me that had left me a little bruised. Are we together? Your laws don't regulate the global factors. Only your resistance will regulate what happens in your local. Can I repeat that? Which law are you going to pass? Which ombudsmans? Which human rights commission? So, I've talked for long. What I wanted to say, local oppression and imperialism must be contested at the same time. My last point is about gentrification. You know what gentrification is? So when they were saying they want to make Kibera beautiful, you build flat, you build, it's still Kibera, eh? Yeah, they just want to make sure. If you grew up in Kibera, you know what I'm talking about. They just want to make it look a little bit more beautiful. You know, just make poverty palatable. Are we together? So what gentrifications are we doing? Of economics. Neoliberal economics has failed. Neoliberal economics is producing inequality, it's producing climate change, it's producing all the things we're fighting against. And they're telling us, no, it is the best form. There were just a few excesses in 2008. Let's make it work better. And all of you, I hear you saying, private sector-driven growth. Who is the private sector? If you are in some of your countries, the same people who are in government, who stole money in government through Euro bond or Ghana bond or whatever, have formed private companies. In South Africa, they call them state capture. You can't distinguish between private sector, public sector, thieving sector, and investment sector. They're all the same. Are we together? Yeah. And that is the problem. You have been asked to become the high priests of a system that is raping your neighborhoods, raping your relatives, raping your environment. Political parties. How many young people are in political parties? Few. How many young people want power? Many. How do people take power in Africa? Through political parties. Others say, oh, the age of independent candidates is coming. In a society where there's structured and stratified, what do you call this, patronage, the political party is a conduit of patronage. You either seize the political parties and make them your own, or you form your own. Right? If you don't form your own parties, I'll tell you what you do. Do what I saw happen. Take over the entire local authority systems. Because you can win at the local level without a political party. How? Comrade Briggs started suggesting to you. Collectivism. Those are the things. When you have taken over the local and you have left the thieves at the national, guess what? They can't operate because air flows from the bottom going up. You just squeeze them small, right? And let them fight in Nairobi. They can't come to Machakos County because Machakos County is liberated zone for free-thinking citizens. They can't come until you begin to do politics that says political power alone without economic power is an exercise in futility. I know many people, my generation, you guys are better. Do you know, comrades, you just decide you want to get married. And then, of course, not be practical about this process. You are African, there's dowry, there's all sorts of things. But the decision to get married was more important than the economic backup, right? Let me tell you something. If you don't get into economic production units, small or big, you are always going to be clients of old people or donors. Can I repeat that again? Can I repeat that again? You are economically unviable. I don't have to be courteous. I'm your brother. You know I love you. You are economically non-viable. You can't print a poster for yourself. You can't even print a t-shirt for yourself. No, you can't buy your fourth underwear for yourself. Now, the problem with the game you want to play is unless if you subvert it and change the rules, you are going to be a client of those who buy you shoes, the suit, the poster, and so on and so on. Decide for yourself. Are you a client or are you a subversive? You can come here and do blaster and talk revolution. I can even teach you how to do more slogans. But slogans without substance makes you client. Our politics is not going to change tomorrow from the importance of mobilization. To mobilize, you will need some resources. Maybe not a lot of money if you're not bribing people. If you need some resources, if the only source of resources you have are donors, then you are going to be an echo of an imperial agenda. Or you are going to have to mute everything you say to fit the funding proposal. Are we together? So are you willing to pay for the normalization of the abnormal? Or are you willing to pay for the transformation of the abnormal? Now, I'm asking a question. Let me tell you guys, and please don't, you know, Sam and I are friends. Not too young to run. Many of you have never studied. Briggs, confirm this. Zimbabwe 2000 had the highest number of young people contesting for elections. In fact, Zimbabwe, the young man you call Chamisa, who now wants to be leader of the MDC, right? He's only 40 now. Subtract from 2000. That's when he first entered into parliament. How young do you think he was? We had many of them. Oh, Comrade Briggs, please help us. We had so many of those young people. What has changed? Even in local authority.
Things have gone worse.
Listen to me, my sister, from Uganda. Until your activism is unskilled, running of the state requires leadership, management. You cannot run it purely by passion. There's a moment where you must build the skill to be the alternative. You can't run it purely by values. You don't negotiate international trade treaties simply because you feel that I have good values. You have to understand the rules of international trade. Activism without skill simply becomes a very passionate expression of intention that cannot materialize. I'm a man. I can tell you about potential and a lack of performance. Ask many women in this room. How many women? You are bothered the whole workshop. You are being followed around. And then you make the mistake of saying, okay, Bana, in the interest of solidarity. Right? Right? And regional integration. After all that effort, you are like, is this the youth empowerment we are talking about? What am I saying to you? Men are not conscious of incapacity. Women, this is free of charge. Men are not conscious of incapacity. You are high-level executives. You walk out there. A guy who has no job, has nothing. If he sees you, he'll say, psst, psst. He will try and chat you up. You know what? Because patriarchy is driven by intention, and intention without skill or capacity is mere frustration. That's why there's a lot of frustration in many homes. At least for the other one, doctors may have cure for the dysfunction. Now for capacity dysfunction in terms of the skill to run a state. So I am happy that you be president at 16 if you want, or 18 or 15. But the level at which I've seen you run your organizations, except you, the level at which I've seen you run your organizations, the level at which I've seen you looting your own funds and donor funds, does not create the impression in me that you are any better than what we have. In fact, I have this suspicion that because you lack ethics, you even lack the skill to steal, that you would become a very, very unrefined thief. No, I want you to challenge me afterwards. Call me a liar, and then I'll pull your files out. So let me land. Militarization. Our countries are fast militarizing because the external investor finds it easier to deal with militaries who can suppress demonstrations, who can suppress dissent, who can suppress democracy. In order to encounter militarism and militarization, we need a transnational organization. Transnational. You can't organize in Kenya alone or in Rwanda. You need to organize transnationally. And solidarity does not mean simply tweeting likes and retweets. Solidarity means, let me tell you what it meant for Mandela. It meant the Ethiopians gave him a passport. The Algerians helped to train him. It meant very practical things that were done to enable, practical things to amplify, practical things. What did solidarity mean from the Zambians? Ask the Zimbabweans and the South Africans. We were in Lusaka. They offered us a board. They offered us safety. They offered us food. They offered us camps. Were they bombed for it? They were bombed by the apartheid regime. What did it mean from the Mozambicans? For those of us who are Zimbabweans, the Mozambican economy has never recovered because they dared keep 65,000 of us in Chimoyo and Nyazonya in the camps. What does solidarity mean for Tanzania? For all the African liberation movements, Tanzania gave us a home, and Tanzania was punished by the West for it. Solidarity will cost much more than data and a click. Solidarity also means we have the capacity to know when someone is in danger where they live and be able to talk to our own people here and say, this person is no longer safe. We would like them to come. All those funny visa things you've got, we can't apply them. In this case, for human rights purposes. Solidarity also means you see brothers and sisters struggling. Don't sit back and say, we told you so. Help them write that manifesto. Help them design those things. Be there. Roll up your sleeves. Be part of designing. Don't sit and have this political beauty pageant where you say, young people are amazing. A guy is talking about his experience in Mali. He says, but we also in Congo, we've done it better. And then the Zimbabweans, No, comrades. No. The reason why we are all still ruled by political bullfrogs that have put on lipstick is simply that we are still uncoordinated brilliance. The moment we begin to coordinate, our solidarity becomes practical. We begin to have political programs of solidarity. We have not yet learned from the Tunisians. What did you do? How did you do it? What did you learn? What shouldn't we do from your learning? Or the Egyptians. Now we have Sudan, we have Burkina Faso. Amongst ourselves, we have not met to process and systematize. What would you have needed when you were doing the struggle that you didn't get from the rest of us other than a retweet? Oh, I could go on forever, but as you can see, I was getting emotional. Kill individuation and individualism. Individualism is about me. Comrades, this thing requires consciousness, but this thing also requires sacrifice. There are things you are going to have to do that you can't tweet or retweet. If everything you've done in the struggle can still be put in a selfie, tweeted or retweeted, you have not yet arrived at the point of risk of transformation. If everything can still be talked about on the phone and on WhatsApp, then you haven't arrived at the point of contesting the reality of global power, of regional power, and of national power. If everything still matters who is the leader, as opposed to what is the organizing idea, then we have not yet arrived at the point of transformation. If Mali is not yet our struggle, if DRC is not yet our struggle, you should have studied the Malian struggle, the DRC struggle, the Zimbabwean, the Zambian. Right now, Malawi has been rotting on its own. Solidarity from the rest of us has been very weak. That's what power wants us to do. Focus on our local, small problem. All our countries were under colonialism when Nkrumah said the independence of Ghana means nothing until the rest of the continent is liberated. Nkrumah understood that the success of one island would count for very little if the global forces that are counterproductive, that are not committed to African progress, continue to design a program of keeping us in conflict and captivated. Where is your Pan-African consciousness that says imperialism is not resting, waiting for us to be democratic? Our dictators are not resting, waiting for us to do revolution. They have seen what happened in Burkina. They saw what happened in Egypt. They saw what happened in Tunisia. They saw what happened in Sudan. You think they are waiting for it to happen in your own country? You must be joking. Stop sleepwalking. It's not an easy job. And it's not just about changing political leadership. It's about changing an entire system that has normalized itself through narrative, through media, through consciousness. It has even made many of us believe in it. It has reduced the problem of global structural oppression to one of individuals. The problem is Mugabe. So you go to Zimbabwe, what is the problem? IMF, it's Mugabe's fault. Right? To Kenya, IUF, it's Uhuru's fault. You go to Rwanda, right? IKF, it's Kagame's fault. No, friends. Yes, you must deal with those. But our world is much more complex. And the dynamic of power. Is that okay? I hope I have encouraged you and celebrated you. And told you that the most important thing that the history of African struggle teaches us is authenticity is better than wokeness. To be woke may earn you hundreds of thousands of followers, but to be authentic will finally pay the price. Authenticity is better than wokeness. The first point of authenticity is ideas. The second point of authenticity is your heart. You can repeat the ideas you hear everyone say, but where does your heart really lie? The third point of authenticity is your relationship. Your relationships. John Maxwell said, people don't care too much about what you know until they know that you care about them. Do you care about Uganda if you are Tunisian? Do you care about South Africa if you are Kenyan? Do you care about Kenya if you are Zimbabwean? I know you do because you are married here. Do you care? Do you care about Congo if you are Tanzanian? Do you care about Tanzania if you are Ivorian? Until we begin to care about each of our little countries as though it were our personal property, even if you don't live there or have a passport from there, this youth movement is a passing cloud that will bring no rain. This youth moment is you know when you start a fire, when you start a fire using papers, newspapers, it has a big flame, it will not last. Until Africa is not only born in your heart, but until you get to where Chinua Achebe got to, saying we're not the children of Africa, we are the mothers and fathers of Africa, because the Africa we want is yet to be born. And we're engaged in an intimate process to give birth to it. So we are not children of an Africa authored by kleptocrats, by autocrats, by dictators and colonialists. No, we are fathers and mothers of an Africa that we are co-creating through solidarity, through ideas, through consciousness. You know very little about Mali. You know very little about, and you call yourself Pan-Africanist. Why? Because you listen to Bob Marley? Because you quote Frantz Fanon? There's an interesting story in the Bible where Jesus said, even the devils tremble. My friends, this is not about a fashion statement. It's not. It's not about power. It's not about having young people in power. It's about changing the nature of power so that patriarchy is not replicated in the new power. It's about changing the nature of power so that negative ethnicity is not replicated. Racism is not replicated. Ageism is not replicated. I've met young people whose ideas are older than Robert Mugabe's in how they treat women in the movement. No, this idea of movement housewifery. We go to movement meetings. They expect the sisters to go and wash up or to cook. And they say youth. No, you are not youth. You are an ancestor who is in the body of a teenager. No, okay. I must end on a positive note, right? On a positive note. Why are these abnormal times? From Tunisia to Egypt, from Sudan to Zimbabwe, from Rhodes must fall and fees must fall to Yanama, from Occupy Nigeria to DRC, from Ivory Coast to Malta. Young people have, out of consciousness and frustration, realized that they cannot wait for the Constitution to deliver the dream, that they would, by sheer willpower and organization, redeem Africa. You are the abnormal in the democracy. Because a democracy born in racism and exclusion, a democracy whose figment of representation was racist, sexist, a democracy that did not see young people is now being infused and enthused by a voice that it ignored and it was blind to. Young people are beginning to say nothing for us without us. You are not going to shave our heads in our absence. Young people are beginning to say, we're not waiting for tomorrow. At the rate of which you ate yesterday and you are eating today, there may be no tomorrow left. Young people are beginning to say we are the buffer that stands between now and the future, between injustice and transformative justice. You are the abnormal component. Don't squander your abnormality by simply wanting to be in power in imperfect institutions, in imperfect politics, on an imperfect ideology based on imperfect assumptions. This moment you're in here is not about sharing resistance only. It's about sharing proposition, from oppositional politics to propositional politics. This moment is a realization that the political economy of power requires that you have the politics right, but you get an economy that enables you to fight for the right politics. Is that okay? Yes. May God bless you. And I hope I still... so you were wondering why I was being passionate and dramatic. Tina took my hat, and she said to me as I stood up, if you speak rubbish, this hat is gone. So I hope I still maintain my hat above all else. God bless you.